All right, one more react, guys. We're gonna watch Legendary Drops.
Transparency is the only thing that I could ever ask for, because at the end of the day, I just want to know what it is I'm actually buying and whether or not I'm actually going to get it. And you guys know exactly what I'm talking about here. DLCs, season passes, roadmaps, false promises, false advertising, content that's never even delivered, or in some cases, content that we purchased, played, and then was later taken away from us. Never gonna forget that, Bungie. We live in somewhat troubling times where we don't know what the future of these games is going to look like. We don't know what the future of our purchases are going to look like because we don't own those things anymore, and they can just kind of change that on the fly. But that doesn't stop them from asking us for more money. We've seen some games that have come out over the last few years that have fallen flat on their face. Games that players had purchased and only within a few months had completely fallen apart. Studios shut down, servers shut down, and the players are the ones that are sitting there still holding the bag, and there's no recourse for that. That's a problem. There should be laws that are in place to protect the players from these kind of things. But the very archaic design of our laws across the world when it comes to video games, and there's a lot of companies that are out there that are taking advantage of that. But Steam is here to say no more. No, they're going to say if you're going to false advertise...
Like, I love the detractors of Steam. They're like, you don't own your games, but here's the thing. I think they're clearly trying to, like, fix that. The only reason they haven't been able to fix that, I bet you anything, is because of the game. They didn't start out with this idea, whereas GOG came up when that was a problem. So, like, they started out with the idea.
Your games, or if you're not going to meet your
very
deadlines,
much a customer first
our hand, and we're going to keep
base.
you in line. And while they shouldn't be the ones to have to do this, I'm happy they are, because this is a huge win for consumers. This is a massive step in the right direction for consumer protections, and there needs to be more of it. And this is going to have some huge implications in the future, and that's what I want to talk about today. But before that, today's sponsor. Are you ready for an MMORPG experience that doesn't hold your hand, challenges you, and brings you back to the glory days? Well, Core Punk is here, and it's coming into early access November 26th. This has always been a game that I've been excited to see what it turns into, and luckily the folks over at Artificial Core gave me a chance to check it out while it's still in early development. Core Punk gives me a nostalgic feeling that I haven't had in years for MMOs. It doesn't hold your hand or tell you where to go. The combat is challenging when you're taking on higher level enemies. The classes are unique, and I really like the direction that the game is heading in. Core Punk is an isometric open-world MMORPG that blends the best of MMORPGs, MOBAs, and ARPGs.
Oh, that's background music. I was like,
into a seamless experience. With a world shrouded in fog of war, it combines exploration, strategy, and MOBA-style combat into something truly unique. Whether you're into PvE or PvP, you'll find...
I see the League inspiration.
Session-based game modes from solo and party instances to battlegrounds and extraction missions. Core Punk also features deep character progression with 8 passive talent branches and weapon customization systems that let you create unique builds tailored to whatever your playstyle is. Crafting is robust, with early game materials staying relevant throughout the entire game. Plus, the combat has been finely tuned to deliver skill-based, responsive action that feels satisfying with every hit. With early access launching November 26th, you'll have access to 3 biomes, 12 worlds, 6 classes, with another one added monthly, and a ton of content. Best of all,
I don't know about the classes added monthly thing. That feels like they're over grasping.
Core Punk uses a buy-to-play model with cosmetic-only monetization. No pay-to-win nonsense here. Just a fun, fair experience for everybody. Early access launches November 26th.
It does kind of look like League, and then they want to do the League thing of creating new characters.
Want to play.
Here's the thing, even League doesn't do it every month.
As more games are released as either live service games or platforms for future content, there is a growing concern of whether or not we are actually going to get the money out of our purchases.
I think they did used to do it every 3 months.
Easily players can be taken advantage of. Looking back at the past year with the release of Redfall, that was a game with a planned live service. It had a roadmap for future DLC, and of course, as many games do, they tacked on a premium edition that promised more content in the future. The idea behind buying these season passes that are included with these games is so that the player can save money down the road and invest in a continued experience. I mean, it's the very reason why you're buying a game like this to begin with. You plan to continue to play it and not just play it a single time and walk away. So the question becomes, what happens when a game fails to follow through on that promise? Is there any contingencies in place, anything to protect the consumer? Well, in the case of Redfall, when they stopped development and they closed down the studio and shut down the servers, players who had purchased the season pass for the game had got a refund. They got their money back. However, this was them just doing good on the side of the players, not necessarily following an established rule that's put in place. And while some developers are going to respect that, not all have. In fact, I have been a victim of
which company can you guess hasn't?
This. Going back to the release of Evolve back in
right,
2015, they sold a bundled version of the game with the season pass, as well as selling it separately, and the game struggled to maintain a player base. And after a while, they had a hard time even releasing new content. They ended up scrapping their model altogether and transitioned the game to free-to-play without offering any refunds for the base game or the season pass. Ultimately, the game was shut down soon after, but there are more examples throughout history that are just like this. PC Games End published an article written by Jamie Orr titled, "Valve's New Rules Will Finally Hold Season Pass DLC to Account," in a move to make sure that developers and publishers don't stray from their promises and commitments when it comes to season passes.
Which, like, that should prove it to you that Steam's a customer serve kind of thing. They're like, we will not let you sell on this platform if you don't abide by these rules.
Steam is tightening up their guidelines. Newly spotted...
This is why I'm kind of okay with Steam kind of having the majority, because they don't take advantage of that majority. They use it in benefit to the customer.
Documentation from Valve outlines how season passes must give a release date to all DLC included, describe what's in each piece of a DLC, and much more. A data mine earlier this year hinted that such a change was coming to Valve's storefront, and now it's official Steamworks documentation, which is essentially the handbook for anyone wanting to list their content on Steam, has now been updated with the new section dedicated to season passes. The brand new page clearly defines season passes as a purchasable item of DLC with the promise of future content to be delivered to customers, either as a separate DLC releases or as additional content is unlocked within the base game. Alongside some guidance of how to properly set up a season pass page on Steam, Valve issues several warnings and new rules about what's needed in a season pass listing. The first big one revolves around the release schedule for season pass content. In the process of launching a season pass, you will be asked to commit to a launch timing for each content release in a season pass. That launch timing is a commitment to both customers and Steam. If you aren't ready to clearly communicate about the content included in each DLC and when each DLC will be ready for launch, you shouldn't offer a season pass on Steam. In the new guidance, which was spotted by Pavel Dudnik, the creator of the tracking site SteamDB, Valve also lays out its expectations when it comes to release schedules. Quarter of the year, i.e. January to March 2025, or season/year is acceptable. Of course, a date that's more precise is fine, i.e. June 2025 or June 1st, 2025. It also now asks that each piece of DLC content comes with a brief description of what's included.
Which, those saying that's too much. They can be as vague. They can be like, items, maps, this. And like you saw, they even gave them seasons and year base. But what they're saying is, well, here's the other thing, Jellybean. Epic has known to do that. Clean around your own doorstep before you start expecting others to do something.
There is some wiggle room in that developers and publishers can self-reschedule the release date one time only if a piece of Season Pass content is going to be delayed. However, Valve also stipulates...
And I know Epic wouldn't use their platform for the good of customer.
...that they can only pick a new date that's up to 3 months later.
They cannot push it back 3 months later. That's basically saying, yeah, you didn't establish it at this time. You got 3 more months. Before we're just gonna refund everyone. And we're gonna make you pay.
...than what you originally selected. It also says that if a piece of DLC intended to be released in a season pass is canceled, customers will be offered a refund for the value of that individual piece of content. The refund promise may also be applied if a piece of DLC content is delayed by more than the 3-month threshold. Valve states that even if there has not yet been a customer complaint, Valve may take action if you delay a DLC more than 3 months beyond the release window you originally promised. Actions include removing the Season Pass from sale on Steam, refunding all customers who purchased the Season Pass for the value of the unreleased DLC, or allowing customers the option to refund the entire Season Pass. For the purposes of refunds, the value of unreleased DLC will be decided in a discussion with Valve. I absolutely love that line of, if you're not ready to share details about that content, then you're not ready to sell it to the customer.
Yeah, like, that's what I'm saying. If you don't even know what's going in it, how dare you promise it? Like, how does that even make sense? Oh, we're gonna give you 5 DLC? Okay, cool. What's in them? Stuff. Like what kind of stuff? Stuff. Smiles, walks away.
There have been so many companies that have been the tail wagging the dog. They have all these grand designs for things that they're planning on doing in the future. They're giving all these empty promises to their audience, and they don't even know if they even have a game that's worth it in the first place. Look at that Unknown 9 game. They had an entire cinematic universe. They had a novel, a web...
Which, you know, they probably lost more money than, a lot of people say Concord lost millions. I bet you that game lost way more. Because that's like you had plans in the work there. Like, unless they treat their own stuff with the same, like, flippancy that they treat customer DLCs, they spent money on all of those things. They had those things started to be worked on.
A series of podcasts, all kinds of...
Which you gotta think, that's people, time, buildings, like making up like infographics and stuff like that. Like, that could get expensive real quick.
They didn't even know if they had a game that players even wanted. Turns out they didn't. Developers are going to hate this. Being held accountable not only with their reputation, but now also financially held accountable by...
Which, I gotta show you something, guys, after this. You're gonna laugh at how... Like, you're gonna understand why I say Sony and these other companies like Ubisoft, not to be trusted.
Steam.
There's a reason we stopped playing Ubisoft games, really.
Don't deliver, we're gonna refund it. I love it. Over the last few years, we've had so many issues where the players were the ones that were taking the brunt of these issues, of their mistakes.
Which that should never be the case. You are the customer. You bought the product, and the expectation that you would get the product. If you're not being given the product, you should be getting your money back.
We're the ones that have been held accountable.
You're not going to like them anymore after I show you what I found out, Jellybean.
For their mistakes, because we paid for these games. And they are the ones that just get to walk away from it in some cases.
Like, nope. I'll say this. Old Ubisoft is not there anymore. Anything you expect from the current Ubisoft, you're not going to get if you're expecting what old Ubisoft would have offered. Not one of the devs, not one of the workers that was there back then is there now.
No more of that. No
they
more.
Fired people, and they use temporary workers now.
We're appealing to our empathy.
It's all CEOs and managers.
Steam steps in front of it and says, no. If you can't make it on time, if you can't tell them what's in it, then you're not going to sell it. Or we're going to refund it. You know, I realize now that just recently Ubisoft said that they are not going to do
That's pretty bad,
a
Jellybean,
season
but
pass model for Assassin's Creed Shadows.
Let's just say this reveals how much Ubisoft thinks of its customers.
Even though they were going to before this announcement took place. Coincidence? I think not. I love the idea of transparency and us being able to know what we're actually buying and when we're actually going to get it, because I want to have faith that I am going to get what I paid for. And a change like this helps make...
And this makes me trust Steam all the more. Like, I trust Gabe when he said, like, if it comes to a point where, like, we're going to be forced to try to, like, take away your games, we're just going to un-DRM the entire profile.
That happened. I love how much influence Steam has over their platform.
Like, the only reason they run DRM is mostly because of the developers not wanting to take it off. Like, literally, to be on GOG, you have to be willing to let the people that get the game have full access to the game.
But I don't really like how much influence they have over the entire industry. In this case, I do, because, well, a change like this
That's what I'm saying. Ubisoft can delete your account, but they cannot delete your Steam account, and they would love to. You're going to see what I mean.
Actually going to protect consumers regardless of whatever platform they're on, just because of how
I'm pretty sure
popular
Gabe's
Steam
going to
is.
shut them down hard.
So many developers want to put their games on Steam, so they're going to have to, you know, stay copacetic.
They
no
forget
matter what
Gabe's a
platform
gamer.
they're on because they have to follow Steam's
Gabe
rules.
cares more
You're not
about
just
his
gonna do
customers
one
than he
thing on
does the
Steam and not
companies.
do it for the other players. Otherwise, that's going to put you in a pretty sticky situation. And I think that's what a lot of these developers have been trying to avoid. They don't want to get sued for this kind of stuff because I don't think a lot of people realize this, but in a lot of cases with some of these laws, they don't become laws until somebody goes to court over it, and then a law gets created for it. And I think a lot of these developers have been trying to avoid that because they like how under-regulated this industry is. I've said it before, I'll say
That's what I've been wanting to say. Like, y'all don't realize how unregulated this is. Any other industry, the gacha games would not be allowed to be targeted towards, like, people with, like, impulse control and kids. Like, these gacha games, like, the loot boxes in League would not exist if this was actually a regulated thing.
it again. It's like the Wild West, and they get away with murder out here, and they're going to continue to until somebody else holds them accountable, and in this case, it's Steam. But there needs to be laws in place. Rules need to be stricter than what they actually are right now.
There is some, like, good points to gacha, but there is also quite a bit of bad, and it's mostly due to the fact that it's not regulated.
Because in a lot of cases, we are not protected.
A good idea of gacha is probably something like, I'm gonna have to say Star Rail. Star Rail's very generous. Like, could it be more? Yes. But it is, at least it seems, substantially trying to help out the free-to-play player.
And one of the issues that we're still facing today...
It should be. Jellybean, it should be. China's proposed that before because they know that it's bad.
...is the fact that we can buy something and they can just take it away.
If China's thinking about doing it and willing to, like, lose lots of money over it, you know it's bad.
With so many games going live service and continually
wah.
updating themselves, one of my biggest concerns is the loss of content later on down the road, even though the game is still available. This has been a massive problem over the last...
This is why I hate Destiny with every fiber of my being. Because I was one of the first people that jumped on the Destiny train. I couldn't play for a few weeks near, like, the mid point, and I was, like, busy playing other games, but I wouldn't go back and play the DLC I bought. I was told it was Sunlight. Not understanding, I asked, wait, does that mean I can't play my DLC? And I was told yes. And people were like, what's the problem? Hello? You don't understand how bad that is?
Few years and has been met with considerable pushback from the players. However, there is nothing that is standing in the way of developers continuing to take away what we paid for with no recourse. A great example of this issue is Destiny 2.
Yeah.
Back in 2020, Bungie introduced...
And before the allegations from chat of pre-watch.
...the Destiny Content Vault, DCV. And
Just such a scummy and slimy, sick thing.
initiative to manage the game's growing size by removing older content to make room for newer expansions.
Which, no, you don't have the right. We bought the content. We keep the content.
What made this especially controversial was the fact that it included...
Well, it's a bit late now, Jellybean. Unless they bring back all the DLC, it means nothing.
...content that players had paid for, like the Forsaken expansion. Forsaken was one of the most beloved expansions. It featured a campaign, it had locations like the Tangled Shore, and a fan-favorite raid in The Last Wish. When Bungie vaulted that content, players lost access to a product that they had spent money on, and there was no option for refunds or alternative access. Bungie
Despicable.
justified the move by citing technical limitations, but to the players, this was just taking away something that you had already paid.
It doesn't freaking matter if you have technical limitations. You should have thought about that when you made the game. If you can't run all those DLC, maybe it's time to move to another game. That's what I'm saying. Like, Jellybean, yeah, Lock-On and Jellybean are right. Like, they've deleted stuff, but it's, like, free stuff. And even then, they don't delete it. Like, I know of people that have the helmets that have stats on them. Like, the skin helmets that have stats on them. They didn't like that, though, because they were like, no, that's too much like buying power, because you can buy the helmets. But we're not going to do that. Which shows you that they're a company with, like, morals and stuff.
Paid for to give you more.
They adamantly have said multiple times they don't want to be a pay-to-win.
Things for you to be able to
yeah,
pay for.
You're who I was
referencing.
referencing.
Solely falls with the developer and not with the customer. What's wild about all of this is that soon after Bungie...
I know you have Frost. Who else do you have?
...announced that they would no longer vault expansions following the backlash, but this was just them plainly admitting that it was never necessary in the first place. The vaulting of content, from my perspective, was nothing more than them fabricating a need to buy more content. It undermines the trust and highlights just how fragile the concept of ownership is in digital.
What people don't understand is companies like Ubisoft already petitioned the EDC, and the EDC blocked game preservation for 3 years, I believe. We need that fixed. The second those 3 years are up, people need to be in the trenches. People need to be, like, fighting off these companies and petitioning EDC to do what they know is right. They got paid to do what was wrong. Like, in the comments, in the, like, the little paperwork done, there's a little line where it says, companies are terrified that people would use it for recreational purposes. What the hell do you think games are? Loki or Rhino? If it's Rhino, I may have to start grinding to somehow buy it from you.
Is online, but Destiny 2.
Just because that would be an awesome gift for
Then we have
Papa
Overwatch.
Rhino.
Blizzard took things to a whole new level when they outright replaced the original Overwatch with Overwatch 2. If you had bought the first
they took up an
game,
arcane
too bad.
slot.
It's
That
gone.
was to fix
Blizzard
them from
not
being
only removed the game from availability,
too
but
expensive.
fundamentally changed its structure, switching to a free-to-play model and incorporating a battle pass and microtransactions. While Overwatch 2 brought some improvements, many players were angry about the fact that they had lost the game that they had paid for in the first place, especially since some of the modes and features didn't make it in the transition. On top of that, the planned content for Overwatch 2, the only reason why players could even get hyped for it in the first place, like the highly anticipated PvE hero missions, was delayed repeatedly and eventually scaled back and then never delivered as promised.
Which, like, I don't understand why people keep giving these people the time of day.
Both of these are cases that underline a disturbing trend, the idea that what you pay for is no longer permanent. Whether it's due to technical issues, business decisions, or simple neglect, we're seeing more and more examples of games taking away content or failing to deliver it altogether, and consumers are the ones that are left holding the bag. This isn't just frustrating, it's predatory. When we buy a game or a season pass, we are making an investment.
I knew it was a scam from the start. When they tried to get me to give my phone number and like ID card and stuff, hell no.
Not only in the product, but the idea that the developer and publisher will honor their commitments. And when they don't, what is the recourse? What do we actually have? What can we actually do? Because for all of the pushback and outrage, the reality is that legislators and storefronts like Steam, Xbox, and PlayStation haven't done enough to protect the players, haven't done enough to protect the customers. Steam's new rules,
be right there, be right there, be right there, be right there,
forward, but they only address one part of a much larger problem. There needs to be stricter enforcement on delivering content and keeping the content that players have paid for. Something ensuring that in some way, if something is removed from a game, that it remains accessible in some form, or players get an immediate refund. Personally, I don't think that developers should be allowed to vault content customers have paid for, but for whatever reason, if there is no other choice and the developer wants to do that, they should be required to offer some type of offline version or a way for players to access it through archives. This could be handled through cloud storage or downloadable assets, but there needs to be something there to ensure that players aren't left with nothing. I also think that platforms should demand greater transparency from the developers. Any content that might be removed.
Absolutely. What you guys don't realize is they're slowly stripping away every sense of transparency. I think a lot of people noticed that with YouTube taking away the dislike bar, because companies got mad that their BS was being called out. No, 50% of those dislikes probably weren't necessarily like true dislikes. They were just bandwagoning. But the other 50%, buddy, was real.
Moved in the future should be labeled clearly as such at the point of purchase. This way players can make an informed decision when they're making that purchase.
And now you don't know what's slop and what's not.
Or not they want to take that risk. As we push further into an era that's dominated by live service games and digital-only content, these issues are only going to become more prevalent. Without stronger consumer protections, this cycle of broken promises and lost purchases is going to continue. That's bad for everyone, not just the players. It erodes our trust in the industry. It makes it where we're going to be less likely to want to invest in these games, and ultimately, it's going to hurt the developers and publishers who are trying to do things the right way. Transparency, accountability, and consumer protection shouldn't be optional. They should be the standard. Now, I want you guys to keep in mind that there's nothing stopping any of these companies from taking away the things that you buy, because in their eyes, you don't own a damn thing. And that's
exactly
just the way that this industry is now. I'm happy that there's some states that are out there that are
I have one of those apps too. No, people still dislike the video. Just because you hide in it doesn't mean crap. And YouTube knows that if they literally eliminate the dislike bar, like they get rid of the dislike button, they have to get rid of the like button. And then their video platform becomes less of a video platform than others. Because now I can't tell whether a video is good or not, so I'm not going to watch it.
Notifying customers, putting up signs saying you're not buying a video game, you're buying a license to play a video game. But this issue is just going to get worse as time goes on. They're going to start taking things away. They're going to shut more games down. They're going to take content out of games. They're going to do all kinds of things that you're not going to be happy with, and it doesn't matter. They already got your money. That's it. I think it's one of the reasons why we see a lot of companies that are out there is trying to switch to like live service and free to play, is because there's a lot of freedom in that.
Because they know that now that people know what they were doing, they know that in 3 years, a lot of people are going to be on it.
Because you can't complain about it. You didn't pay for anything. So if they take something out of it, it is what it is. While we don't have a lot of examples of games that have like vaulted content like Destiny or Overwatch or something like that,
no, you
I
can
think
still
we're going to be
dislike a
seeing
video.
more of that stuff in the future, and it's just because
I'm pretty sure. Yeah, you can still dislike a video.
a lot of these live service games
Unless
are
that's
still
my
relatively young. This part of the industry, this new era of the industry that we're in, is relatively young, and there's not
It just
a lot
doesn't
of
show you the number
litigation
next to
that
it.
prevents these companies from doing a lot of things that put us
They just
at
show you the
risk.
like button.
And that's one of the reasons why we have to step forward. We have to talk about these kind of things, and we have to make these issues known, because this is the time to get ahead of it. We don't want to be talking and, you know, complaining about these things 10 years down the road when it's far worse than what it actually is today. So this is a really important discussion. I'm really happy that Steam made these changes, but, you know, like Steam, outside of like DRM, they are one of the few companies that in a lot of cases usually stand up for their customers. Because
that's what I'm saying. Besides the DRM, they're trying. They honestly are. And I believe Gabe. I bet you anything they're trying to work a way in where they can remove the DRM or let you keep the game.
if you make a platform,
Because here's the crazy thing, even if Steam quote unquote bans you, they only ban you from the online of that game. That's the only time they do it. Is if you're hacking or you're cheating and you're making it worse for everyone else, they'll ban you from that game. That's it. You can keep the game. You can keep all your other games. They won't take them from you.
or your customers, who would have guessed it, they actually use it. Maybe try to think about that, Epic. But
that's what I'm saying, Epic. Epic's one of the naughty list ones.
That said, I think that there's still a lot of rules that need to be put in place. I think there's a lot of different areas in which we are still incredibly vulnerable when it comes to some of these companies. Another one of the things to look at is early access. Well, I've had a lot of success in early access. I've had a lot of really great games that I've played.
Early access is a mixed bag. On one hand, it's very helpful and good for games. It helps people see the game in its infancy, see how well it's doing, and they can support it. But on the other hand, some companies and some people take advantage of that, half-ass most of the updates, then they just disappear after they got enough money.
Ball Balatro, Baldur's Gate 3, Pal
Yeah,
World,
like
Hades. There's a ton of different ones that
there's
I've had a
the
great
only
time
games
with.
they do that for
It's
Jellybean
still an
are
area
like
in
games
which
that
a
they
lot of
own.
companies and a lot of developers could come in and make a lot of promises and never deliver upon it. And what are we going to be left with? Now, mind you, they actually have a warning that pops up to tell you that, hey, things might change and yada, yada, yada. But at the same time, I still feel like if you're going to be selling the game for as much as some of these early access versions of these games are, there needs to be some contingencies in place. And
That's what I'm saying. I think Steam needs to have like a... I think they do. I think you can talk to them when you're requesting a refund and be like, hey, and show them like what happened and stuff. If I remember correctly. But I think they need like a more ironclad rule in place. It's like, hey, you can't just like cut and dump. Well, that's the thing, Nooner. There are some games that stay in early access for a long time that are good. Like, they are honestly trying their best and are doing good. So, like, using that blanket method would affect games like that.
I feel like in some cases, just like with the Season Pass and the DLC,
I think player base and like the dislike ratio should affect it.
Steam might need to sit down with some of these different developers and go, hey,
yeah,
you know, what's your time?
Paladins is actually a really good game.
Because the last thing you want to do is have a game that's in early access for like 10 years or something like that, or never even.
Well, there will be bad actors, Nooner.
But yeah,
who just don't play the game anymore, and we'll just refund it.
But I'm still really
even though they
worried
played a lot of it.
There's a lot of areas in which we're not protected, and we need to be. And it sucks that there's
It
really
would
not
hurt
anybody that's
that
out there
too
that's
much.
a voice for us in the
I think there needs to be like a clear.
I'm talking about outside of social media, right? Like, there's plenty of
I
people
feel like
online that
users
will talk about
should be
these
kind of
things,
the
myself,
deciding factor.
Asmongold, a few other people as well, but there's
It's
nobody
almost
in
over, Roy.
government that really understands a lot of these issues, and I'm probably not going to see anybody like that for at least a few more years until I guess some of us gamers grow up and get responsible. Oh, I mean, we already did the grow up part. Well, the grow old part. Anyway, let me know what you guys think about all of this. I wanted to keep this relatively short, but I love to see a change like this. I want to see more changes like this in the future, and these are really important topics for us to discuss, so make sure you guys are talking about this with people. If you guys enjoyed the video, share it to your friends, subscribe to the channel.
Yeah, I'm gonna react to that tomorrow. Walk on the PoE director thing. Blah.
I'll start looking for a shoe ping, and preferences boka, boot, sandal, high heels.
Not happening! Spartan sandal, obviously.